Throughout your career, have you encountered projects that further sparked your passion for civil engineering? Can you tell us about one? Or more?
Yeah, so I go back to my original project when I started as an inspector. Again, just, this was my first experience with civil engineering, but it was the Youngsville Sports Complex, phase 1, and it had various aspects of civil engineering, everything from drainage to water, sewer, pavement, your typical civil engineering stuff, but it also had, the additional things like the turf on the baseball fields, netting poles, foul poles. I mean, you name it. It encompassed all of civil engineering. So it was a very unique project, and that's definitely one that really sparked my interest to pursue engineering.
Well, you think that being an inspector first gives you like a little foot in the door on how you think about it in a different way
Absolutely.
than like your design engineers?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've seen, from a constructability standpoint, we kind of know a little bit more what's involved in sewer, for example. Sewer is typically a deep installation. You can be going 15 feet deep.
You're listening to FUELED, a Fenstermaker podcast, and I'm your host, Marina Saad. Hi, I'm Marina. I'm an engineer intern at Fenstermaker, and we're here to interview Dustin Guidry for Engineers Week. Dustin Guidry is a licensed professional engineer in Louisiana with extensive expertise in civil engineering and construction management. Dustin began his career with Fenstermaker in December of 2012 as a construction inspector. In this role, Dustin collaborated closely with contractors and engineers in the field, ensuring projects adhered to plans and specifications. Evolving within the company, Dustin transitioned into the role of a CAD technician, where he collaborated with engineers and surveyors to generate construction plans, survey plats, and project exhibits. With a solid foundation in civil engineering, he furthered his career as a project engineer, shouldering responsibilities for construction administration. After over a decade of involvement with civil engineering projects, Dustin achieved his professional engineering license in late June 2023. So freshly licensed, bet that felt good. All that said, I'm excited to be here with you for Engineers Week, a fun opportunity to get to know you a bit better and expose your expertise. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Happy to be here.
You ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
So let's start with the first question. What sparked the initial interest to pursue civil engineering? Was it a particular experience, a fascination with a specific aspect of the field, or perhaps an aha moment where you realized you wanted to do this?
So, as anybody knows, I kind of started my engineering career later on in life. I think about a few different situations where I guess engineering was kind of brought to my attention. I remember when I was younger, probably high school age, working with my dad in New Orleans, driving underneath the overpasses and stuff like that. He mentioned to me, he's like, man, wouldn't you like to design some of these bridges and all? I was like, maybe, but never really kind of took to it, but I think he always knew I had like a technical mind and was good in the math and sciences and stuff like that. But I think what really led me to be an engineer was more about opportunity. When I was looking to start a family and work from home or work closer to home, I worked at Fenstermaker. So this was really my first experience with civil engineering. I had a lot of construction background, building houses and stuff like that. So when I did initially go to college, it was for architecture, which, wanted to design the things instead of building the things. So I think I did that for a couple years, and it was a little bit more art than I expected it to be, So then I just kind of finished with a general studies degree. And then I actually came to Fenstermaker, and then this is what, exposed me to civil engineering. And I say it's all about opportunity, because obviously getting a job here, I was working on the sports complex as an inspector. And another situation that I remember is Dax having lunch with me one day. He was the project manager on the project. And I'd been with Fenstermaker for a few months at this point. Brought me out to lunch, started talking about my future with the company. So I think even Dax kind of saw something in me, and he's like, hey, you ever thought about maybe working in the office, and just kind of, ask what that entailed and all, So in order to like really, I guess, move on within the company, it required me to go back to school and get my civil engineering degree, which is what I decided to do after being with Fenstermaker for 9 months. So that's kind of, as an inspector, I liked what I was doing as an inspector, and I also saw, the engineering role in it all, and I figured this is something I can do, and one of the best decisions I've ever made. So.
Throughout your career, have you encountered projects that further sparked your passion for civil engineering? Can you tell us about one? Or more?
Yeah, so I go back to my original project when I started as an inspector. Again, just, this was my first experience with civil engineering, but it was a Youngsville Sports Complex, Phase 1, and it had various aspects of civil engineering, everything from drainage to water, sewer, pavement, your typical civil engineering stuff, but it also had, the additional things like the turf on the baseball fields, netting poles, foul poles. I mean, you name it. It encompassed all of civil engineering. So it was a very unique project, and that's definitely one that really sparked my interest to pursue engineering. So yeah, I'm definitely excited to work on the second phase of this, because that's where my career started, was on Phase 1.
It takes you back to
it definitely takes me back.
Yeah,
it definitely takes me back.
Where you started and now you're here, you see the progress of your career.
Yes, yeah. I'm in a different role, but still handling lots of the same things from Phase 1 to Phase 2.
Can you describe your experience with large-scale projects? What role you've played and maybe some challenges you encountered?
Yeah, so when it comes to large-scale projects, there's 4 main projects that I've worked on that I would consider large-scale, and this is in complexity and dollar value. Youngsville Sports Complex, again, is one of the bigger complex projects that I've worked on. At that point, Phase 1, I was an inspector.
That's a big one.
And it was a challenge. It's you have several crews. You have a crew doing drainage, another crew doing sewer. You have electricians and all these people on site. So that was definitely challenging, just being my first inspection job. But just kind of made it across the 70-acre site. Daily, checking on these crews, keeping up with them. But that was my main experience with that project. Other large-scale projects, roadway projects, would be, the Acadiana Airport Access Road. That was a pretty big project. Apollo Road in Scott, Phase 1.
A big one.
Phase 1 and Phase 2. Both of them had different challenges. I think I was kind of fortunate that both of them were basically in the middle of a field, and there's not, there's less challenges going through virgin territory. But each one of them had, tied into existing intersections, and that's when the challenges, to me, when the challenges really start. Dealing with existing utilities, dealing with, maybe other permitting agencies, like in this situation, at the beginning, DOTD owned the right-of-way at Dulles and Rue-de-Bellier, so kind of coordinating with them anytime we wanted to just move a water line, from 2-3 feet over. Kind of had to coordinate with them a little bit. Those are the types of things, when it comes to a coordination standpoint. Sometimes you run into unforeseen field conditions. Ran into, a big trash pit that nobody knew about, so we had to.
A trash pit.
Yeah, just had to encounter it, and you just move it, remove it all, and replace it with embankment. Those types of things that, our design engineers do a good job putting a set of plans together, but there's no way they can catch everything, especially unforeseen situations. Maybe there's certain constructability issues that weren't thought of. I think most of the challenges that we deal with are just maybe the engineer sees it being constructed one way, or built one way, and the contractor sees it done another way. So that's a lot of what I deal with on a day-to-day basis. It's just those types of challenges, dealing with the contractor and maybe seeing things in a different way that design engineers may not have thought about.
Well, you think that being an inspector first gives you a little foot in the door on how you think about it in a different way.
Absolutely.
Than your design engineers?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've seen, from a constructability standpoint, we kind of know a little bit more what's involved in sewer, for example. Sewer is typically a deep installation. You can be going 15 feet deep or more in some situations, depending on the situation. But that takes a lot of room to do. It's like you can't just cut a hole down 15 foot deep and put a pipe in the ground and backfill it. It's pretty expansive, the amount of room you need to do something like that. And having that field experience definitely helps me when I'm talking with design engineers. Like, hey, look, just think about you're going to need a 15, 20 foot easement just to put the sewer in the ground. It's like, oh, you can't just put it right up against the right of way and say, you're good. I run into a lot of that. Also daily is talking with design engineers and kind of giving them some constructability tips and stuff like that. So.
How do you prioritize safety on construction sites, and can you provide an example of how you've implemented safety measures in the past?
Yeah, so I think Fenstermaker does a really good job with prioritizing safety. With our boss card program, it should be at the forefront of all of our employees' minds, especially those that are out in the field. So yeah, when it does come to safety, initially it's all about a mindset. You have to think about safety. You can't see somebody doing something wrong and just turn a blind eye to it. So I think that's the first safety measure, is just having the right mindset. And I think, like I said, Fenstermaker does a good job of getting us in that mindset. And I think a lot of contractors are the same. We deal with contractors on a daily basis. So several contractor companies, that's a priority for them too. So it makes our job a lot easier when it comes to keeping a job site safe. But what we do is we take basically whatever the contractor requires. If our vest and our shoes are fine, then that's kind of what we go with. But contractors sometimes require hard hats, depending on situation. So we'll throw on our hard hats, so it all depends on the situation. But PPE is always a big component to safety as well. And then I'm gonna use like our first aid kits. I've had 2 situations recently just having a first aid kit in the vehicle, it has played a huge role in someone getting hurt. And we typically have those in our vehicles for our inspectors or for our workers. But as soon as somebody hurts themselves, we can grab it and we can help them out.
Yeah, that's always better to be prepared.
Yeah.
What about regulations? Like, what about OSHA regulations and whatnot? Do you think those come in handy when keeping in safety requirements?
Yeah, so that's another thing that we look for out in the field. I do look at it when I go out in the field, but our inspectors are aware of certain OSHA regulations, especially when it comes to open trenching and stuff like that. You want to have proper shoring. You want to have your trenches stepped back. You want to have your stockpile set off to the side. There's a lot of different points that our inspectors look at, and in determining whether a situation is safe or not. And we always have the authority to stop a job. If we see a man down in the hole and we see a safety hazard, then our guys are,
I would hope so.
They can speak up and say, hey, look, this doesn't look safe. Y'all need to stop. You need to regroup. Let's come up with a different plan. Maybe get some more shoring out here. Maybe move some material around. That type of stuff. But we always kind of protect ourselves, but we always want to make sure that the people we're working with are protected as well and being safe. At the end of the day, we want everybody to go back home to their families and stuff like that.
So we're moving on to some more like technical questions, more leaning to construction admin, but I'm just going to ask about a few new things that have been brought to light in recent years. How have drones been integrated into your construction projects, and what specific benefits have you observed?
Yeah, so we've been using drones recently on a couple of our bigger projects. At the ones I mentioned earlier, Acadiana Airport Access Road, Apollo Road, Phase 2, and also on Youngsville Sports Complex, Phase 2. The benefits, we've seen the benefits at Fenstermaker. I've been able to use the footage just to kind of keep up to date on the project, kind of really see the overall picture. Our inspectors do a good job of giving us the details on what's going on a day-to-day basis. But a lot of times it's just that field level view. And these drones allow us to get a bird's eye view and really see what's going on, especially on a project, big in size, whether it's a mile long roadway or a, 70-acre site, whatever it may be, just to get an idea of all the different pieces that are coming together at the same time. I've actually used it to, negotiate with contractors when it comes to certain quantities at the end of the month. Hey, you said X amount of progress has been done, but looking at this footage here doesn't necessarily seem that way. So we use it, to our advantage in in our CA standpoint, but also for our clients. Our clients have utilized the footage to keep the public informed of the progress on the projects. So I know Iberia Parish was grateful to have that footage for the Acadiana Airport Access Road project, and the City of Scott as well. We put out monthly videos with the mayor, and a lot of our footage was used in those videos. So.
Do you think that it also helps keep the contractor accountable for any damages that he may or may not have caused throughout the project as well?
I mean, it can. It depends on how often we're flying this, and if we catch those situations, because you got to think about it. There's lots of work being done throughout a week, and we're really only flying it maybe once a week, every other week. Just from an overall standpoint, the project is making progress, but what you're going to see from a bird's eye view doesn't really change, every day. So that's why we kind of schedule these things, a week, 2 weeks out, something like that. So it all depends on if we catch certain situations, if we have footage of, whatever issue may have come up, it could help,
Could come in handy.
Could come in handy.
Maybe.
But that's I wouldn't say that's a priority or the reason we're doing these things.
How has prefabricated or modular construction been applied to streamline your projects, and what were the results? Are there considerations or challenges unique to prefabricated or modular construction methods?
Yeah, so when I think about precast or prefabricated, really, our contractors use a lot of precast boxes. We use a lot of precast box culverts, and recently we've been doing some conspan structures, and those have drastically sped up the project. So for a drainage structure, for example, it may take the contractor a week to pour an entire box. You start with the floor. You got to make sure everything's dry. You start with the floor, then you form up your walls, and it can take several different concrete pours. But most contractors are electing to go precast. They just pop it in the ground, put your pipes in, and then grout it all in place. So it's a lot faster for the contractors. Same thing goes with any box culverts. It's much easier to take these little sections and stab them together. Rather than having to form it all up and then pour it. So yeah, it definitely speeds up projects, especially the bigger, box culverts and conspan structures. I think one of the challenges with either one of those is for the contractor, just, they need bigger equipment, So if they're doing a concrete pour, there's really not a whole lot of equipment involved. They can form everything up, by hand. You might use some small equipment. Again, it takes a little bit longer. But if they get a bigger piece of equipment, take a precast structure, slap it in place, and they can move on. Bigger box culverts, conspan structures, you start getting cranes and everything on site. So then you got to figure out, where can we put a crane? We need to make sure we have level ground to put a crane and where are you going to stage all these components, and how are you going to grab them? And it's more challenging on the contractor, in that aspect versus, it's a completely different challenge versus, figuring out how you're going to get all the material on site, figuring out where you're going to put your equipment and install it versus, how we're going to farm all this up and then get concrete trucks in, So it's each of them have different challenges, but, contractors typically choose the precast route. So.
Do you think from a cost perspective that it comes into play, like it's cheaper to do precast or more expensive to do precast?
Yeah, I think it's cheaper to do. I mean, contractors wouldn't choose a more expensive option, I guess. Mm-hmm. Most of our projects are designed, bid build, right? So the contractor has to provide a good competitive bid, So what's the most cost effective option? would be to do a precast structure. Cost effective, and it's going to save them time on the project. So yeah, from a cost standpoint, I think you're a lot better off going with precast. And these structures are actually built off-site, so it's a lot more. It's built in a more controlled environment, in a factory or a facility somewheres, specializing in building these structures. So let them build a structure, and then it's just a matter of coordinating and getting it on site. And then again, like I said, figuring out how to get it installed and all that. So, but I think it's definitely more of a cost-effective thing to go precast.
How do you stay updated on the latest advancements and best practices in civil engineering? Can you give an example on how you applied new knowledge to improve a project?
Yeah, so what I do to stay updated is attend seminars and lunch and learns. Now that I'm a newly licensed engineer, we have professional development hours we have to keep track of. So you have to stay up to date on things that are going on in the engineering industry. So yeah, and I do that. Like I said, lunch and learns, attend seminars. Haven't done any conferences at this point, but I'm sure that's something I'll be doing in the future. As far as I guess seminars that I've actually used in practice, one that I think about is I did a seminar on joining concrete a few months back, and most recently I had to kind of do a joint layout for a project. So kind of using what I learned at that seminar and brought it into real life. So
that's pretty cool. Which project was that for?
Youngsville Sports Complex.
Is that phase two?
Phase two, yeah. We originally had a joint layout that we put together using 6-inch thick pavement. So that the requirements on that were to have certain spacings, and we actually dropped it down to 4 inches. So had to go through and relay all that stuff out, using some of the stuff that I learned, through this seminar. So
that's interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
As a professional civil engineer, you've seen the impact of infrastructure on people's lives. Can you share a story that exemplifies how civil engineering has made a difference in improving the quality of life for our community?
Yeah, so I keep referring to the same projects, but it's nice to see that you've worked on these projects and you hear people that may not even know you've been involved in the project just talk about how they utilize that roadway or that complex on a daily basis. So Youngsville Sports Complex Phase 1, I remember being out there as an inspector, watching it, all the drainage and everything go in the ground, sewer, water. And then years later, you're talking with friends and their kids are playing ball at the complex, just kind of hearing stuff like that. We did the baseball fields, soccer fields and stuff like that, but the volleyball courts were added not long after, and I'm a volleyball player. So I'm able to take advantage of some of the things that, I guess that first project kind of started. So yeah, I mean, you can see I guess the quality of life improvement having a complex like that. Apollo Road Phase 1, I have some family that lives in the area, so they knew I worked on the project, so they were constantly asking me, hey, when's that project going to be finished? So just knowing that, now that it's finished, I know my family's benefited from it. Now they have an alternate route to get to the interstate. I know the residents of Scott, other people in Lafayette. Now they got an alternate route. You're not stuck in the middle of Lafayette on Ambassador or something like that. But also just to see the development, for the community of Scott, along Apollo Phase 1 with the West Village and all the shopping centers that you see popping up. Their economies definitely benefited from it. So I think all the residents have benefited from it.
Do you think that it would become there would be more development in that area since the Apollo roadway has been finished?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that was one of the main emphasis to do the project was economic development was one, drainage improvements was another, and also to provide better traffic routes.
What skills and qualities do you think are crucial for success in the civil engineering industry?
Yeah, I think for engineering, obviously, you need to have some knowledge in maths and the sciences and stuff. But I think from a mindset standpoint, you have to have somewhat of a technical mindset. You got to be able to question things. Not just see what's on the surface, but maybe go a little bit deeper. So a technical mind, something that somebody's going to like ask questions and get into things a little bit more than I guess most people would is definitely a great quality. Communication, I think communication is a great quality to have in just about anything in life, because you're dealing with so many different, people and components. And, when you're designing a project, you have to be able to communicate with other engineers, whether it be, people you work with, or, you may have to reach out to a mechanical engineer or a structural engineer, to kind of work on a project. So you need to have that communication. You need to communicate with the client, get their thoughts. What do you want on this project, and take their wants and actually put them into the project, and also keeping them updated throughout construction, how things are going. You also need to, from a construction administration standpoint, you need to communicate with a contractor. We don't always see eye to eye, but you have to be able to communicate with them to where, it's not you got to build a relationship to where you can trust each other, and there's not a whole lot of animosity between you. You don't want to have that type of relationship. So communication is key in a lot of things we do.
What advice would you give to aspiring engineers to find the same level of enthusiasm?
I guess one thing that keeps me going, is I'm a very visual person. I've been in construction for 20 plus years now with residential and civil engineering. And one thing I like about it is like when you leave work at the end of the day, you can see there's progress being made. You can see what, whether it's, framing of a house, we put up this wall today, and then tomorrow we put up another, 10 walls, and before you know it, you have a whole structure standing there that you actually built, Same thing with civil engineering is, you see a road that gets built, now it's on a much bigger scale because, you started with a set of plans, now you see a road get built. And it's great to see that road being built, but like once you see everything else outside of it coming together that you really weren't even involved in, you just kind of, almost just laid a foundation and for everything else to be developed around it. So that's what keeps me going.
On to the last question.
Okay.
Before we go, I have to ask our closing question. One posted to all our interviewed guests. In the spirit of FUELED, our podcast name, what fuels you? In general, in life, in your career, work, family, etc.
Yeah. So I would say the people, and it's different levels of different layers of people. Obviously, my family, keeps me going. They're the fuel, if you will, that keeps me going. My wife in particular, when I decided to go back to school at 32 years old or whatever, she had to make a lot of sacrifices because we had started a family, and there's a lot of sacrifices I was in school and we were building a family at the same time. So, lots of sacrifice, and that's definitely something that keeps me going. The people I work here at Fenstermaker, also fuel me. We have a good group of engineers, that we all, we get along, we work well together, so there's that working with these people on a daily basis is something that keeps me going as well. And then the community, the people of the community, seeing the improvement to their lives that we're able to do. It's also, it's a little bit more than just, seeing something that you design, get built, and now you see it, but it's seeing other people benefit from it. Like I mentioned earlier, just hearing about people using a ballpark, or hearing about somebody say, man, I use Apollo Road, and, it cut 5 minutes off of travel time. That's one thing, but again, seeing everything else that gets built off of that one project, so that's kind of what keeps me going is the people that not only help me get to where I'm at, but also benefit from what I'm putting out there, basically.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us. I'm sure everybody learned, and I sure did learn a lot from you. I hope that I keep learning from you in the future and for the rest of my career. And I'm glad you took the time to do this with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I had fun.